Michael, I'll start with you. Why won't the Prime Minister condemn Dan Andrews for attending this parade of dictators and authoritarians?
Because he's weak and he's of the left. That's the only reason. Look, I wasn't surprised to see Dan Andrews there. I mean, you know, he's a left-wing nutter and he's been that for a long time. I think the thing that disappoints me, having been part of the Carr government, is Bob Carr sitting on the sidelines. You know, I was like, Bob is very fast becoming the sort of Malcolm Fraser of the Labor Party, you know, getting really dottery and silly in his old age. I just find it extraordinary that he could claim last week that, you know, the Jewish lobby was influencing our policies, yet he finds himself in China and he's not there, you know, running across Tiananmen Square with a poster calling for the end of the Uyghur genocide. He's there on the sidelines allegedly celebrating the victory of China in the Second World War. But, you know, what he forgets is if he wants to celebrate the victory of China in the Second World War, he got to go over to Taiwan because, you know, it was the nationalist government that actually led that victory in China, the Chinese people to victory. And it was Mao's mob that basically, you know, undermined them at various stages. So the whole thing is just a farce. It is a disgrace. They ought to both be ashamed of themselves. And Albo ought to make very clear that we don't stand with any of those. Those missiles, as you know, James, will be aimed at Australia if there's a conflict. And they're there celebrating that parade.
Yeah, well, indeed, there were ballistic missiles paraded during that event that are capable of reaching the Australian mainland. And there's Dan Andrews, I presume, clapping as the ballistic missiles are paraded past him. Cameron, it's a bit cute, isn't it, for Dan Andrews to pretend, well, he's just there as a private citizen?
Oh, absolutely, James. And the Chinese Foreign Minister actually named the invitation list that Dan Andrews is there because he's a former Victorian Premier. So the Chinese have let the lie out of the bag here, James. So he wasn't there in a private capacity at all. I mean, there were despots, dictators and Dan Andrews on that stage. It was appalling. And hopefully he's completely trashed his relationship with the Australian public from there. But I think the secret, James, is that photo is worth $1 million. $1 million. He'll be able to mint himself money in China with that photograph because he'll go to every person with Chinese influence and say, there I am with Xi. There I am with the Chinese leader. So that's just a licence to print money, for Dan Andrews and his shadowy consultancy he runs in Victoria.
Yeah, it begs the question, doesn't it? What price for a man's soul? I want to move on to talk about...
Money talks.
Indeed, it seems to.